All right. So essentially for the next series of assignments, well, next couple of projects, we're going to be exploring the sculpting workspace within Fusion. Now, so far, we have been basically building things dimensionally, which means that we have been taking sketches or predetermined solids, which are much more like solid forms, more geometric forms, not necessarily not organic, because we've done some sketching and such, or some sketches rather, that are more free-flowing, stuff like that. But we've used like very straightforward tools to make those two-dimensional things three-dimensional, and then manipulate them, being, extrude, revolve. We started playing with lofts and such like that, which a lot of that's going to carry right over, because a lot of this stuff is straightforward in its like literal dimensionality. It's going from 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions. You're looking at things, front, side, top, bottom, all of that sort. But what we're going to be working with tonight, or starting with, is the form workspace. Now, again, there's a multitude of different ways you can approach sculpting in Fusion. We're going to be focusing on the form tools. Now, when we switch over to Fusion, you'll see that, of course, we're going to highlight that there are other tabs like the surface and mesh workspaces. These are very parallel in the beginning, or there's a lot of very close similarities, but there are distinctions for a reason. But we're just going to focus on one of them. You can, of course, expand as you like. Now, with all of that, there's going to be a lot of playroom, and that's what I wanted to focus on tonight, is that this is learning a whole new set of vocabulary and way of working. Because what I meant by you're working very dimensionally so far, this is working very freeform. You are sculpting with these tools. And now that doesn't mean you have to be like an art background. No, not whatsoever. What I just mean is, rather than working very dimensionally, very straight, single dimension to 3 dimension as you do extrude, stuff like that, you can push, pull, and just kind of move things around as you see fit. So that's really what I mean for that. Now, a lot of what how this works is it is based off of spline tools. So just like the sketch tool of working with a fit point spline, you are effectively choosing points, and the program is drawing a smoothed curve between those points directly, and then you can grab handlebars and move those around and augment that shape. Similar here. Also similarly, that like we were just working with the loft tool, it essentially draws a transition between flat profiles, which is kind of a 3-dimensional spline tool, in that you have those curvatures to still work with, that sort. The form tools is very much starting with a not angular shape, and that'll make a lot more sense in a moment, and manipulating it. Very much akin to how these spline tools work. You're not going to be working with direct extrudes. They're going to be more of soft extrudes, kind of like pushing Play-Doh around. Yes, of course, there are the actual like extruder tools where you could make a star shape or spaghetti shape and all that such. I know. But more of how you can just kind of squish it around. You push in one direction, it squishes out the other. Sort of, kind of. Not a great analogy, but more of that we're working with more sculpting forms. So let me switch over to Fusion, and let's have a look at actually what we're working with. So over here in Fusion, we're working with the form workspace. Now, so far, we've been working really with sketches, extrudes, and of course, plenty of others within this. There are the other tabs. If you across from solid, which is what we're going to be staying with, but across from solid, there's surface tabs, which have many of the same sets of tools. All your sketches, extrude, revolve, sweeps, all of that, loft even. There's also mesh. Now I'm going to explain why these are all related once we get into form space. Mesh works with a series of vertices and series of faces to move things around. How much of this works, and as I open up the form tool, much of this works is how the relationships between different components of a shape are. And as you see in the example here, it says enter the form mode and insert form, blah, 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 blah. Use forms to create and edit. Now, history-free bodies. Remember how now we have our history slider at the bottom of the page or the bottom of the screen as you're actually making augmentations. Unlike when you're in the sketch workspace, yes, you can Control Z or Command Z, Command Y, Control Y, back and forth, but there's no recorded history. Same thing with this. There will not be a recorded history for how you shape the form. So if it helps you, think of it in terms of there's no history recorded in the sketch environment, but you can always go back into it and manipulate back and forth. So there is that to keep in mind. But you can start with predetermined bodies, much like working with solids, and you can push and pull on the vertices, edges, and faces. We're going to get into exactly what that means. This is commonly referred to as T-spline editing or modeling. And much like the sketch workspace, you have to finish the form space to exit out of that mode. So what happens? I'm going to press that button. Your entire toolbar, your entire toolbar changes to now you have a bunch of form tools. You have your starting points. You have a box. You have a plane. You have a cylinder. You have a quad ball, which is the difference between like a globe sphere and like a soccer ball or volleyball in this case. You also have a face where you could just create faces. And then there's a sphere, again, like a globe where it has longitudinal and latitudinal lines. Essentially, the difference being a quad ball is if you were to inflate a square to perfect round. That's kind of how that geometry comes up to be. And of course, you have all your modifiers and symmetry and different things like that. So we're going to get into what all that means. But main thing is, I want to talk about how does this work? Now, there's a couple different types of modeling. We're not really going to talk about the first, which a lot of other programs use, which is called NURBS modeling, N-U-R-B-S. It's non-uniform rational bias splines. Yeah, no, blah, 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 blah. Basically, it's three-dimensional spline tools. Works off of control points. So, you know, the points that we had been drawing to create a spline, ... That's how those work. T-splines is what Fusion uses. Is very much the same type. It's just slightly different. Whereas the other is more of like a mesh. T-splines are more of a rectangular net. Ultimately, the biggest way to think of any of these types of tools, imagine a net, like a fishing net. You have all of the lines, all of the actual string that makes up the web. You have the knots where those all tie together, and you have the overall plane that exists on. So to help illustrate that, first, let me just create a plane here, and I can just kind of throw out something here. So sure, we'll just start simply. I can always add more pieces. We'll just go with that. Fine. Not going to worry about that. So ultimately, the description goes, like I just said, think of this as a big fishing net. Now, you can always create something larger, smaller. That's the standard with any of this stuff. But how you modify and manipulate these is based on your selection, in that the overall piece is a plane. Currently, it's a plane because it is a absolute two-dimensional flat surface that spreads off in two directions, x-axis, y-axis. Within that plane, you have faces. You can see as I mouse over, I can select any one of these squares. Are they always going to be square? No. But they are always going to be, oh God, the word just fell out of my head. I'm sorry. Polygons. God, there it went. Sorry. So at least 3, but usually 4 or more sides. So a face is any one cell contained within these edges and points. Zoom in, And what does that really mean? You can also select just the edge. The edge is any line between 2 points. Makes sense. But think of that, there is a reason for the different terminology, because it's not always going to be flat. Then you have your vertex, your vertices, your points. That's literally where all of these converge. So as long as there are 2 or more edges, you have a point, or you have a vertex. Between at least in Fusion, 3 or more, usually 4 or more edges creates a plane or a face. Multiple faces, edges, and vertices create a surface. Is it always going to be flat? No, because we're going to manipulate that. But think of those in terms of your selection points, because from those points, and I'm just going to quickly show you an example here. We can go to edit form, which is the main modifier, which is what we're going to be using. And why did I say that it's more like a fishing net? Because you can select, like, say, a vertex, multiple faces, or by edges, but let's just select just that vertex for now. Pull on one, and the rest begin to follow. So if we're going to go with, like, think of it also in terms of like demonstrations on like space-time and gravity, and in your description or and visualizations of like gravity wells and such like that in like science textbooks. We don't need to go into all that, but we'll go with the simplified version again of the mesh of the like the fishing net. Pull on one, the rest will follow. And this is, let me switch to, like, say, one of the other viewpoints. This is exactly like a spline. If I had a line, a spline with multiple points, if I pull on one, the rest will follow suit. So it's not isolated from one another. Ultimately, a T-spline, the reason why they're described as that, they usually end in a T. So that edge goes down and meets the other two, and its shape makes a T. That's literally why they're called T-splines. Because a lot of other NURBS modeling usually is with triangular meshes, so you're going to have three edges, and they don't necessarily come to a T. That is literally the reason why they're called that. But being able to choose between, and if you look at the selection toolbox here, we're going to get into what all this stuff means in a minute, but main things I want to be able to describe is why, or rather what these are made up of, because that's how you can make your selections. Now, the default setting for edit form tool is all the way over here, is all. You can switch between hotkey or use hotkeys or selecting on here, Alt F. But you can also select only by vertices, and when I select that, you see all the vertices appear on my screen. Same thing with edges. Now I can only select edges. I can't select faces. I can't select vertices. I can select a single edge, or if I double click on that edge, it selects the entire edge within the boundary of the form. Select by face. I can only select the faces. I can select multiple faces, double click, and it selects the whole surface, or form rather. So those are the most important aspects to note on working with forms, or the basics of working with the form workspace, is your selection filter and what we're really referring to these as. Now, is there more to this? Of course, but for the moment, and this is what we're going to really be playing with tonight, and I do mean that play, that's the best thing I can tell you to start to learn some of these, is literally just start experimenting and seeing what happens. There's no requirement for this. I want you to play with this stuff just to find out what happens. Because as you play with the selection filter, say like, okay, I grabbed a face there. I can move it around in one direction, and you see how the whole thing stretches. I can drag it up and down, everything else stretches. So you can really play around with these. And right now I've just created, like I said, working on just a plane. It's no longer a single two-dimensional plane. This is a plane more in terms of like a sheet of paper, but of infinite rubbery paper. So I can stretch and pull, but it's still going to technically maintain that original rectangular shape, kind of, because obviously I can grab like edges and such and drag it on out, and that is anything but a rectangle anymore, although it still maintains those points. So these are just the basics. What happens if I start to like delete things, which you can, does not have to even remain that original shape. Let's start by deleting that vertex. Just selecting it, hit delete. Oops. Oh, forgot I got to get out of the form space. I hit escape instead. Just hitting delete. And now that is how those two edges with a shared vertice become one single edge and makes a rounded shape. So like where normally you would have used like a fillet to round that over, you can just delete the shared vertice and it becomes a single edge. So those are the kind of things you're working with here. What if you select one in the center, delete that? Now this whole thing becomes a single face with no shape edge in between. So essentially edges give hard definitions, faces can be smoother. Can edges be smoother? Yes, absolutely. But just more of that is a method of selection there. Now just know that right now I'm still in the form workspace and I can click on stuff, I can select things, but I cannot manipulate those. I can move them, but it's going to move the entire piece. So in order to actually shape this, you'll need to use the edit form tool. Excuse me. So within this space, just like with sketching, I can create multiples that are all going to be on the shared space. Let me select a quad ball, say. And now, just like before, you have to select which major plane you want to work on. Something over there on the XZ plane. Expand outward. I choose how big I want it to be, 90. All right. Now I can start to select how many faces and such I want. One of the other major things to keep in mind, as we start dividing things, you can use a slider, fewer lines, lots and lots. Say you wanted to sculpt something complex. Start simple. You can always add faces later. So, whoops, accidentally selected the diameter, not the slider. So I definitely don't want 50. We will slide that down further to 2. So it's just how many more divisions it makes. Okay. So I can keep making stuff in here. I can keep manipulating stuff, but I can't exit out of the space and do more things, more akin to like we have before, until I go up to finish form. Just like with sketching, there's no history being recorded. It's just being able to, it's just creating things. I finish form. Now I'm back to my regular workspace. From here, this is where I can then apply what we've already learned and modify these objects further. So say like, all right, within this, if I had manipulated this quad ball, maybe now what I want is a sketch behind it. And I'm going to just draw something, I don't know, an ellipse right there. Enter, finish sketch. And then I could extrude that ellipse straight out or symmetrically going outwards and cut. And now I can put more dimensional modifications to the thing I've already done. Well, can you go back and now that I've done this, can I go back into the form workspace and modify it more? No. You can make a new form, or you can go back on like your history slider, right click on form, edit. Now you can manipulate the form a bit more. Sure. Let's say drag that out and bloop. Just warp that around. Hit OK. Finish form. It's going to cut the same, but those are the steps. You cannot make modifications to a form once you have edited, once you have moved on outside of the form workspace and then done modifications afterwards. So that is the progression of steps. That said, for the most part, for this first project we're going to start working on soon, you will do all your editing and such first. Then you will be doing more of solid extrusion sketch-based modifications to it. So you're good there. All right, so those are the basics on just how does this go about working. Let's go ahead and mess with this. Oh, by the way, despite that being one single form creation, look at my bodies. It's created two different bodies. If I join them, they'll be one, just like normal. But it also shows two different things. One is a body, the weird quad ball. It has the solid form. It has the solid icon. It's a cylinder, solid cylinder, because it is a solid three-dimensional body. However, the other one, the plane, is shown as this orange kind of foil wrap. That is showing it as a surface. Those are the color definitions on it. The reason for that is, although it is technically a three-dimensional object in that, you know, it moves up, goes up and down in the z-axis as well as x and y, it is only a plane thick. So it is not basically the best description for that is a non-zero thickness sheet of paper. So meaning it's anything above zero, but it has no real thickness to it. Can you add thickness? Yep. You can go back in the edit space, edit, select the whole thing. There is a thicken tool. Add a little bit of thickness to it. Let's say 4 millimeters. Okay. Now when I hit finish form, now that shows as a body. So that's how you can manipulate that kind of stuff. So cool. All right. Those are the extreme basics on just what the form space is, how to identify some stuff, and a couple of definitions on really what these mean. Let's make some stuff. Before we go on, I just want to double check, see if anybody has any questions. So I'm going to pause there. Okay, back on. So great. Those are some really, really basic stuffs. Let's let's hide that. And let me just create a new component, and we'll call that experiments. Okay. So those are the really bare bones basics. Let's start a new form or into the form workspace, and let's start playing with this. Let's see. Let me show you some of the stuff that you can really do with this. So let's start with a really basic thing. We'll go to create. We have all of our examples here, and you can still extrude, revolve, sweep, and loft within the form workspace, and you can manipulate them a lot more. You can also create sketches just as you normally would. So again, as the intention of Fusion is, it's just the reason they make all these different changing workspaces is just an attempt to not overwhelm you with like a interface that has all the things, and it tries to be a little intuitive. And again, yes, sometimes that intuitive interface change gets very confusing. In this case, I think it works pretty smoothly. That's my opinion. Let's start simple. Let's start with the sphere, smack in the middle. Let's say it's a 100 millimeter sphere. And we'll start with, let's dial it back. Let's go with 6 longitudinal and 6 latitudinal lines. Keep it simple. Now, within this creation space, you're going to see something at the bottom here. You have your options of the diameter, obviously, longitudinal, latitudinal faces. You have symmetry. Currently, we have none. You open the checkbox, and there's mirror, and then there's circular. Now, you can apply symmetry later. You see it right in the center of the toolbar. You can create symmetry, which is, in this case, it's either internal or external. I'm going to get to that in a moment. Symmetry within a created form is, say, either mirrored. I select that, and you can select either lengthwise, and you see a green line appears right here across the length. or deselect that, excuse me, go to width, and you can see the green line instead is a series of lines up here on either side. Or height, which now means the green line is across the equator there, so it's top to bottom. So you can automatically apply symmetries within, or circular, which means, when you look from the top down, you can see it's all around. Very cool. I'm going to go ahead and select none for now, because I'm going to show you how to apply symmetry afterwards. Select OK. So now I just have a basic form, super duper there. Now, like I said, your standard stuff is going to be, your creation is just creating it, literally just that. Oops, I didn't mean to hit that. Modify, this is where you want to play. Lots and lots of stuff. For the most part, we're going to focus tonight really just on edit form and a couple of hotkeys. So go to edit form, which is the tool I used just before. This is where you can select all kinds of stuff. So right now the default is, again, all. So I can select faces, I can select edges, or I can select vertices. Let's start with one of the faces, just there. Now, what do all of these mean? You got this really complex looking gimbal going here. I usually call it a gimbal. It's just all of the other tools that if you mouse over, you can see different things happen. So as I zoom in, it always stays the same size, which is kind of irritating in some ways. Let's start with the arrows. The arrows are orthogonal direction modifiers. What that means is simply select one, and it's going to move move the thing you selected only in the direction you selected it, which in this case is going to be relative to not to the location of the face, but to your standard X, Y, and Z axes. So even though I'm selecting there or there, if I move it out, it's only going to go in the X axis, or in this case, the Y axis. So I move this in and out, you can see boing, 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 boing. It's only moving in one direction. Select the other arrow, boing, boing, only going in that direction. Last, only up and down. What if I want to move it in all directions at once? Any one of the flat squares, and as you might start to notice, these relate to your axes and your origin plane, or your origin selector, which is right in the middle, so you can't see it right now. If I select the square in the center there, I can move it in either direction, both in this case, Y and Z axis. Orbit around, same. Now it's X and Z. Center, or center flat, now it's Y and Z. Why can't I move it in all three directions at once? Because your mouse only moves in two directions. That's why. You cannot move in three directions, simply because that's not how the input device for your computer works. If you had a VR set and you could grab it, yep, then you could move in all three axes all at once. Unless you got one of those, that's what then we're not going to deal with it. All right, well, what are the other ones? Well, you've got your other, on the outside, you've got the arcs. These rotate. In that one, it's rotating across the Y-axis. Rotate up here, across the X, and here, rotating around the Z-axis. Now we're going to play with some other fun ones. What are these arrows out here? These are your scale tools. You can scale, you can freeform scale stuff up and down. The straight lines is a non-uniform scale outward in the axis direction. So in the Y-axis. Line across, doesn't matter which side. Non-uniform scale in the Z-axis. And you get the idea for the other one. The curve is both X and Z axis in this case, or over here, X and Y. Smack in the center If I mouse over, you see those three arrows, those three triangles appear. Center, that is your uniform scale. Once you've got that selected, you can see that little toolbox pop up where those numbers are going up and down. Once you've selected that, now it's already highlights the numeric input, so I can put in instead, you know what, I want it to be 0.23. Shrinks down. So that is what all of those tools mean. Very handy stuff. All right, cool. Kind of weird, kind of boring, or not kind of boring, but make some weird shit. Now, some of the other tools that you can work with on the fly are hotkeys. You can press and hold Alt, or if you were on Mac, Command, and you can free extrude a face. So I currently have Alt pressed, grab that, and you can see instead what just happened. I'm no longer pulling just a face, it added one. Release Alt, press again, and you can keep doing that. Between each one, it's inserting a face, it's inserting a line, and it is creating an extrusion. Now, if it's round, and you want to create an extrusion there, press and hold Alt again. Or what you could do is press and hold Alt Control, or again, if you're on Mac, Command Control, and it will create a crease, sharp bend. Press both. You see instead, much sharper. This is very useful if I'm like actually rotating, something like that. So press and hold. So you can just really start pulling things out and such. So this is how you can really play around with these shapes. You can also kind of get into some really weird shapes that's going to cause problems later. But again, we're just playing right now. So far, all right, great. I just made like a weird one-armed thingy thing, I guess. Whatever. Well, instead of that, let's cancel that. So I got this weird thing. I can, of course, finish form. All right, and that's what I was going to see about. You can also push it too far, and it won't let you finish, exit out and finish form. So read the errors. What it's telling you here is edges or faces might be crossing. Review in box. Yep, failed to convert. Okay, return. Press return, and it's going to keep you in the finished form space, but it's going to highlight the problem areas. What that meant, now you can see what it said is the faces are edges are crossing. That's literally what's happening here. So what that means is you can go back to modify, and like this spot, it is crossing itself. I could try rotating, or that might not be the option. Let's try dragging it out that way, so it is no longer crisscrossing itself. Select OK. Finish form. Now it's fine. So just what happened to the two edges, instead of staying on opposite sides, they actually crossed one another. And that is a math no-no for the program. So, all right. So that's just kind of free form playing around. Let's play with some symmetries. Open up bodies again, hide that one, start a new form. All right. So in this case, we'll stick with the sphere here. I'll do again the same. Right there, smack in the middle. We'll say 100, and we'll leave it at 6, super duper. So this is where the symmetry part comes in. Again, you could have applied symmetry at the time, but you could also apply symmetry down the line. So base symmetry, and of course, if you open the drop down, you're going to see the options. Mirror is just your standard mirror. It's across a single line. Whatever you do to one side, it'll do to the other. Circular is radial symmetry. So on something like a sphere, in this case, looking straight down at that center vertex, you can see the edges radiating out 6 different lines. That's what you want. Mirror duplicate is copying a body, across a plane. So it's just making a duplicate body that is, again, a mirror of itself. And again, circular is basically the circle pattern tool, only you're making duplicates, and then any one thing you do to the first, it'll do it to all of them. Then, of course, you can clear all of that and apply isolate, so you can avoid, so you can say like radial symmetry, but I want to avoid this one sector. Pretty much that. But let's play around with internal. All right. So how do you apply symmetries? You select a face and then another face. Whatever line is between that, so that out there, it's going to try to apply to that. Now, right now, because I skipped a spot, it thinks I want to apply it to horizontal or latitudinal symmetry. I don't. I wanted it on longitudinal. So select one, and then right on the other side, now it's selected the green line going up and down. That's what I wanted. Great. So now if I edit form and select something on this side and drag it out, it does it equally on both sides. Keep playing around with it. Oops, I didn't mean to grab scale. And again, let's play with just press Alt and extrude. Sharp one, there you go. So that's how that works. Okay, cool. Well, what about radial? Let's create another sphere. I'll just do this over here, another 100. Great. And this time I want to create, this time I want to create circular radial symmetry. So at this point, what I want to do is look at the top down, and I'm going to select one face. Now it's going to give me options, what it thinks I can use and what the options are. At least it's 6-sided, so I can evenly divide it. So it automatically is going to try to give me the options. Whatever plane I select next will determine that, or I can just select something from the drop down of 2, 3, and 6-sided. So let's say 6. Cool. Select OK. Now you can see the green lines are on all latitudinal lines. Great. So now if I were to edit form, select one of those, and let's just drag that out. Now it's going to select on all of them because they're all they're all sharing an edge. However, if I were to say now extrude, so press and hold Alt and move out, now I can start doing some weird stuff. So I just had to actually extrude outward rather than just move that one piece outward. So now you can start to see how you can start to make some really interesting shapes with the form tool. Again, make another, and I can drag it along while I'm doing that extrusion. If I want, I can rotate that, make it a little bit more propeller blade, and then I can rotate again and actually start to twist those parts. And again, since it's all a spline, it's going to follow suit in that everything is connected. Move one, and it's going to have an impact on something else. Maybe not a strong impact, but it will have an impact. So you can keep playing with that, but now you can see how the extrude tool and symmetry can start to apply. Select OK. Now let's just show you something real quickly about, like, say, symmetry external. Let's say like duplicate. Select that object. Great. And what is my center point? Oh, select that one. There we go. Let's see here. And let's select I just selected the Z axis because it doesn't prompt you for selecting your axis. It just assumes you want to do something. So I just created 3 on all sides. And this is essentially your circle pattern tool. I can create more. I can create 5 of them. They're all intersecting. That's fine. You can do partial, meaning like only over a radius. Use a slider to make more or less. That's so many. We'll just stick with 3. And you just play around with that. But that's how you can make multiples. Same thing goes for symmetry. If you wanted to duplicate, select the object. Now select a mirror plane, which can just be your plane. And it just creates one on the opposite side. Now, looking straight down, you can see that because that original object crossed that plane, my duplicated one crossed that plane, but they are mirrored. Additionally, because I have symmetry within that one object and I have external symmetry across those two, if I go back to edit form, say, I don't know, let's go to the bottom. Let's make some little leg thingies. Select there, and there we go. Press and hold Alt, drag outward. It's making some weird little footy things, but my mirrored one is doing exactly the same. It's all mirrored and symmetrical. So that's pretty much it. So those are just some neat ways that you can just start playing around with this stuff. Now, so far, we'll finish form. Those are just our weird symmetry bodies and such. Okay, great. Now, so far in the edit form, we've just been using spheres and such. I want to show you a box. Now, a box is a rectangle, a cube, whatever. It's just a standard box starting point. However, it's not going to come out like you think. So I selected a plane to start with. I'm going to start right smack in the middle again. I'm going to go outward, normally like you were creating, like it says, the selection box here, starting point is a center rectangle, just like a sketch. Let's say 100 by, I don't know, 80. So it's a rectangle. Okay. Why is it doing that? 80. There we are. Oops. That's not what I meant to do. Let me delete that. Problem is, if you hit enter, so you can do like 120 by 80, but then you can still move it around. So it's kind of problematic that way. Now, since I didn't hit enter, I just clicked the left mouse key. Now I can also give it vertical dimension. So jumps up and down. Let's say 60. Okay. However, obviously you can see it's not a like hard rectangle. It's like a squishy eraser blob. So this is how the form workspace works, in that you're not starting from a hard edged object because it assumes you're going to make an organic shape with this. Now, again, you can apply symmetry within this already. We're going to leave it at none. You can add faces, be it lengthwise. You can do width faces. And of course, height. As I said before, let's keep it simple. Select OK. All right. Now I can do the same. I can start to edit this form. I can drag that out. Super. Or rather, I can hit Alt, drag that out. And I could do the same for multiple faces over here, because so far I've just been selecting single faces. Press and hold Alt. Oops, I didn't mean to select have the other one selected. But apparently I just made like an internal thing, so that's certainly how you can do that. Not what I meant to do. Let's deselect all those and just get those. There we go. Press and hold Alt, or let's do hard crease. There we are. I can scale that down. Oops, wrong scale. Squish. And I can start to add things. So now I want to show you, now that I've done that, I can go ahead and add internal symmetry. Not determine a symmetry because there's no center selection. You have to have a even number to be able to add symmetry. So what that means is I probably need to have a face in there. Let's add a, or not a face, but an edge. One of the other main options is insert edge. This is how you can add and subtract, or you can add edge lines in. Now, what you do is you select an edge or series of edges, meaning if I select there, you're going to see a green line appear right there. I want all along that edge because I need an edge right in the center. So if I double click that, and it's not doing it. I'll have to go all the way around here. So this would have been a good chance to, or this would have been a good chance to have added more lines into my piece there. Why is it not letting me select there? That's okay. All right. So I have that edge, those edges selected. And now it's wanting to add the edge to the outside. I don't want it there. I want it on the inside. So drag it over, or just hit -0.5, because these again work from 0 to 1, 0 being right on the edge, 1 being to the next edge over. I want it smack in the middle. Okay, right there. Added a line. Great. Now I should be able to add symmetry. There to there. Okay. That green line highlighted. Now it's not going to be on that little section back there. That's okay. I don't need it back there. Select OK. All right. Now I can say select one of those faces, edit form, and Alt, drag out. Does it on the other side. Rotate that down. Alt again. Beep. Little leg thingies. Select another face. Alt. Down and back. Rotate down. Alt again. Obviously, you can see where I'm going with this. Kind of little leggy things. What if that's too thin? Select that face. Drag it outward. Make it wider. What if I want to select instead? So far, I've only been selecting faces. Let's select just the edge. Or better yet, let's double click on the whole edge and it selects all the way around. And I can use the scale tool, the center, to shrink the entire thing by the edge. Now, for right now, for just learning, is there a better selection tool, or which is the better one? Vertex, edge, face, or all? At the moment, there's not. There will be shortly, but for just learning purposes, try them all out. Essentially, it's just a lot of, for what we're doing at the moment, depends on how you like to work. If you like to work by selecting vertices, you can select just single points. You can drag those up and around and such. It's got little haunches now. Or over here, does the same, up and away. I can select edges. You just want that one edge, drag that out, scale it down, kind of has a wee little beak thing. I can continue to cut those faces apart and smooth things out. Now we will be going over the rest of these options later, but for now, just playing around. So I made this unfortunate green creature thing. Now there's a slew of other details here, or of other options. You can of course insert edge. Subdivide automatically allows you to add more edges within a face. So say like over here, I want to create more faces just inside this box or inside this face. Select that face. It automatically subdivides that evenly by just one edge vertical, one edge horizontal, or one X, one Y. You can of course select other options. Don't want exact, just wanted that one. There we are. So that's how you can play around with that stuff. I urge you really just to go down the list and experiment, see what different things happen. Now, some of these aren't going to apply yet because you're not at the, you don't have the features created into your model yet to apply. Something like fill hole. Well, there's not a hole in this yet, but if I selected that face and deleted it, well, now there is most certainly a hole because I can see inside, and because there's no face there, the edge is just rounded over. So until I did that, now I could go to fill hole, select that edge, and it collapses that. You have a few different options of how to collapse that. They're not really going to apply completely. We're just going to stick with the default. Closes up the hole. So some of the tools have to have a certain feature already created into your model in order to apply. Same thing goes things like you can use things like crease. If I wanted a sharp edge somewhere, by selecting on the edges, you can see how that becomes much sharper of an edge rather than that smoother round. So my little frog monster friend now has crested eyebrows. That kind of thing. One other thing I do want to go over quickly is the utilities tool. Now, one of the things is the repair body. You saw how when I tried to click finish form before, it kind of went haywire. One of the ways you can do is select the repair body tool under utilities, and it will most often fix the tools or fix what is wrong with your model, or at very least point out and highlight what the issues are. So if I click repair body, selected that, right now there shouldn't be any issues. Even though it's showing me error stars, should be okay. Normally what you could do is just then select repair body or select individual ones, repair, it should be okay. We're not gonna have to worry about that because if I hit finish form, no errors came up, so there was nothing to repair. Go back into the edit workspace. Other utility I mainly want to show you is display mode. Now, sometimes it can be very confusing working with the all things around it and such, especially when we've been working so far just with hard edges and such as extrudes and things like that. So you can toggle the display mode by selecting the top here, and obviously the whole thing. Display mode being, you can display it in box mode, which really seems confusing as can be, but this is what the thing looks like basically if it were just straight geometric extrusions of things, because we made extrusions to those faces. You have smooth display, which is what the default viewing method is. The mix is control frame display. So it shows you the rectangular kind of ghost outside of the organic shape inside. And then, of course, it shows you the actual shape there. So if I select OK, you can see those boxes exist, but they're just reference points. So I just want to show you that if it's something that you prefer to work with. And sometimes, so now if I go to edit form, yes, I can see the object, but if I wanted to select by edges, which is what it kind of forces you to do here, or by select faces and such, you can see that it's selecting the outside face. Sometimes working this way is a little bit easier to see. See, I can just see just that edge as displayed by that mode. It's not actually showing up or anything. It's just showing those variations. Select OK, great. All I did was change a little bit to that. If I want to go back to it, just go back to smooth display, and you're back to what you normally were. So smooth is just one of the easier ways sometimes box display is just a little bit easier way to see more complex shapes. That's all. But yeah, that is the real basics on form editing. As I said, thing that I encourage you to do, play around. Make a box, make a plane, make a cylinder, sphere, torus, which is a donut, quad ball, and a pipe. Pipe functions off of a sketch, so you have to have a so you actually have to have a path, just like pipe did in solid workspace. And play with some of the modifiers. See what happens. One quick thing I realized I kept leaving on here. I should have closed. Fusion, I guess, will be down on Saturday, so super duper. Close that. I should have had that off the whole time instead of having that message bar on there. But that's pretty much the basics on form editing. Again, there's so much more, as you can see here. But for now, I just want you to play around. We're going to discuss the official assignment next week. I will post that early for anybody that wants. But ultimately, I want you to just play around, experiment, and obviously finish the other stuff. So hopefully that wasn't a completely confusing and overwhelming introduction to the form workspace. Just know that that is one of the more easy to manipulate sculpting functions within Fusion. There are the others, the surface and mesh tabs, but we're going to stick with just the form workspace for this project. So good luck with it. Experiment, play, mess up a bunch, and just see what happens. And we'll, of course, do some troubleshooting on fixing some of the stuff if you've gotten to it. And then next week, we will do the official actual assignment. So play around, mess up, and enjoy. Where are my screens?